The Washington, D.C. air hung heavy, not just with the sweltering summer humidity, but with a palpable dread. On Capitol Hill, within the ornate confines of a House Judiciary Committee hearing room, every eye was fixed on two figures at the epicenter of a brewing national tempest. There was Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in history, a figure of audacious confidence whose platinum hair seemed to catch every glint of the room's grand chandeliers. Across from her sat Gavin Newsom, the charismatic governor of California, a man whose polished demeanor barely concealed the fire of his political ambition. This wasn't merely a routine congressional inquiry. It was the crucible where federal power and state sovereignty would violently collide, a battle destined to redefine the very fabric of American governance. The city of Los Angeles, once a shimmering city of angels, had become a landscape scarred by conflict. Weeks prior, ruthless ICE raids, executed with a swift and brutal efficiency that shocked the nation, had torn through its communities. The aftermath was a descent into chaos. Cars burned in the streets, their skeletal remains stark against the urban sprawl. Police officers, once symbols of order, were shot amidst the unrest, and a visceral, unyielding chaos gripped every corner. Spilling from the shadowed alleys into the sun-drenched boulevards, Governor Newsom hadn't hesitated. With the swiftness of a seasoned political tactician, he rose to challenge the Trump administration. His office filed a lawsuit, a legal gauntlet thrown down, accusing the federal government of blatantly violating state sovereignty. He believed he held the undeniable upper hand, armed with constitutional principles and the moral outrage of his constituents. Yet, the moment Karoline Leavitt spoke, her voice clear and sharp, her icy gaze unwavering, it delivered a sharp blow to Newsom's meticulously constructed arguments. The seasoned governor, accustomed to dominating any forum, was left stunned, as if struck at his weakest, most vulnerable point. This wasn't just a legal hearing, it was a bare-knuckle brawl for political dominance. Ambitions burned fiercely, raw and unconcealed. The federalization of the National Guard by President Trump, the deployment of troops to Los Angeles without state consent, was an unprecedented move, a declaration of federal might that Newsom considered an affront to California's autonomy. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The future of immigration policy, the delicate balance of power between Washington and the states, and the very stability of a nation deeply fractured by political divides. Before we dive deeper into this explosive story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your engagement fuels our ability to bring you these crucial narratives. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss the latest, most compelling stories as they unfold. The hearing room of the House Judiciary Committee was steeped in a tension so thick it felt as though it could be cut with a knife. Committee Chairwoman Representative Margaret Hensley, a seasoned Texas politician with a steely demeanor and eyes that missed nothing, leaned toward the microphone. Her voice rang out decisively, cutting through the murmurs of anticipation that filled the chamber. This hearing will examine the deployment of the National Guard to Los Angeles and the impact of federal immigration policy. We expect a thorough and civil discussion. The stage was set, the combatants were ready, and this political battle, fueled by clashing ideologies and unyielding wills, had only just begun. The echoes of shattered glass and angry shouts from Los Angeles seemed to reverberate even within these hallowed halls, a grim backdrop to the unfolding drama. Newsom was invited to speak first. He stood, a picture of measured confidence, buttoned his suit jacket, and approached the podium with the poised assurance of a seasoned orator. The chandelier's light caught the silver in his hair, highlighting a statesman's gravitas. His voice, when it came, was warm, compelling, and resonated with a practiced power. Chairwoman Hensley, distinguished members, he began, his gaze sweeping the committee. "I stand here not only as the governor of California, but as a resolute defender of state autonomy and human dignity." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The president's unilateral decision to federalize the National Guard without so much as a word of consultation with our state is a direct assault on the 10th Amendment. It is an act of overreach that has torn apart families and sown fear in communities. Newsom's voice hardened, laced with a controlled indignation. These ICE raids, far from being a measure of law enforcement, have been acts of terror. I have seen children hiding in their homes, their eyes wide with fear, their parents afraid to go to work. This isn't law enforcement, it's chaos masquerading as policy. He let the silence linger, his words sinking in. The violence in Los Angeles, yes, it's tragic, profoundly tragic, but it erupted because of federal overreach. ICE agents stormed businesses, targeting hard-working people who have lived lawfully for decades. The president says he's protecting America, but in reality he's dividing it. He's fracturing our communities for political gain. Newsom scanned the room, catching a nod of approval from a Democratic congresswoman from California. The hearing room stirred. Reporters typed furiously. A few activists clapped until Hensley's gavel silenced them, a sharp crack echoing the underlying tension. Leavitt, unfazed, merely jotted a quick note and slid it to Tom Homan beside her. His stern face showed no emotion, but a curt nod signaled agreement. Then, with a click of her heels on the polished marble floor, Leavitt stood. She approached the podium with a confidence that belied her mere 27 years, a predatory grace that commanded attention. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear, sharp, slicing through the lingering whispers of Newsom's plea. "Chairwoman Hensley, distinguished members, let's dispense with the rhetoric." Her eyes, cold and assessing, swept the committee. The president acted squarely within his authority under Title 10, not only to protect federal assets and personnel, but because local forces failed. Los Angeles is engulfed in flames, stores looted, police officers injured, autonomous vehicles burning in the streets. Her gaze then locked on Newsom, a silent accusation. "Governor Newsom calls this ICE's fault. I call it a catastrophic failure of leadership." She paused, letting the indictment hang in the air. "The American people, Madam Chairwoman, agree with us. Polls from CBS, CNN, and Ipsos show 54% support deporting illegal immigrants tied to crime. Republicans lead Democrats by a staggering 19 points on immigration. The public trusts this administration to restore order, not to obstruct it." With a crisp click of a remote, Leavitt activated the massive screen behind her. It lit up, not with charts or graphs, but with raw, unvarnished scenes of urban apocalypse, a Waymo vehicle engulfed in roaring flames, its advanced technology reduced to a charred husk, crowds of masked figures hurling rocks at LAPD officers, their faces contorted with rage, T-Mobile store windows shattered, their displays looted. Murmurs spread like wildfire through the room, a collective gasp of disbelief and horror. "This," Leavitt continued, her voice low but weighty, "is the direct result of Governor Newsom's policies. His sanctuary state harbors criminals, facilitating drug trafficking and money laundering, all while law enforcement is overwhelmed. ICE targets specific threats, not innocent families. The president deployed the National Guard to protect, not provoke. Governor Newsom's lawsuit is nothing more than a political stunt, not a legal argument." Applause erupted from the Republican side, led vigorously by Representative Paul Whitaker, a staunch Trump defender. Reporters scribbled frantically, cameras panning to Newsom, who leaned over to whisper urgently to an aide, his face a mask of simmering frustration. The battle had officially begun. The ornate chandelier cast a stark glow on Karoline Leavitt, highlighting her platinum hair and razor-sharp gaze. She rose from her seat, Steps, light but resolute, holding a thick stack of documents. Each page felt like a bullet, ready to dismantle her opponent's arguments. The screen behind her still displayed the harrowing scenes of Los Angeles's violence. A charred Waymo vehicle, scattered T-Mobile glass, and a wounded officer clutching his shoulder. The audience murmured, a low, unsettling hum, as cameras captured every flicker of Newsom's face, meticulously scribbling, trying to mask the tension that tightened his jaw. Chairwoman Margaret Hensley nodded, her voice dry, but her eyes betraying a distinct curiosity. Miss Leavitt, please present additional evidence supporting the administration's stance. Leavitt gave a slight smile, not warm, but charged with the undeniable confidence of someone certain of victory. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Today, I will show the members why the President acted and why the American people stand behind him. She held up a report, its cover bearing the stark, unmistakable ICE logo. This, Madam Chairwoman, lists 62 individuals arrested in the Los Angeles raids. These are not the innocent families Governor Newsom so tragically describes. These are drug traffickers, money launderers, and affiliates of transnational gangs. One example, Juan Morales, 38, arrested for running a money pipeline for a Mexican cartel. This, honorable members, is the truth, not a sob story. She set the report down, her voice steady but cutting a surgeon's blade. ICE doesn't raid indiscriminately. We target criminals. But when Governor Newsom indulges sanctuary state policies, he effectively turns California into a magnet for these dangerous individuals. Leavitt clicked the remote and the screen shifted, blazing with a colorful, undeniable chart. Look at the data. An Ipsos poll, 54% of Americans support deporting illegal immigrants with criminal records. CNN, 52% back ICE's raids. CBS, Republicans lead Democrats by 19 points on trust in immigration. Her gaze swept the Democratic members, daring them to rebut. The public doesn't want chaos. They want security. A new video played, different from the last. It showed a Los Angeles street corner, cloaked in the grim reality of unrest. A crowd hurling rocks at police, a patrol car ablaze, its flames licking hungrily at the night sky, and an Adidas store with shattered glass, its merchandise now plunder. In for the mob. The video's shouts echoed in the room, making some members shift uncomfortably, a stark contrast to the sterile calm of the hearing. This is Los Angeles under Governor Newsom's management, Leavitt said, her voice low but weighty, filled with a grim triumph. The LAPD sheriff wrote to us, confirming local forces were overwhelmed. They couldn't protect citizens, let alone federal property. The president had to deploy the National Guard, not to wage war, but to save the city from itself. Representative Rosa Delgado from the Democratic bench raised her hand, her face taut, her voice trembling with anger. Miss Leavitt, you paint a picture of chaos, but ICE's raid sparked the violence. A single mother, Maria Gonzalez, was wrongfully detained just for passing through a raid zone. You call that security? Leavitt didn't blink. Miss Delgado, I regret any errors, but Maria Gonzalez was released within 24 hours after verification. Meanwhile, Governor Newsom let violence escalate. He's accountable for that, not ICE. Representative Paul Whitaker, a Republican from Arizona, seized the moment, his tone sharp. Miss Leavitt, can you clarify? What authority does the president have to act without Governor Newsom's consent? Leavitt nodded, her voice firm, authoritative. Mr. Whitaker, Title 10 allows the president to federalize the National Guard to protect federal assets when local authorities are overwhelmed. Los Angeles proves it. The LAPD sheriff reported their forces were stretched thin. We couldn't stand by. Newsom, seated across, gripped his pen tightly, his face flushed. He whispered to an aide, clearly cornered. Leavitt, sensing his unease, pressed her attack. Honorable members, California under Governor Newsom's leadership is a textbook case of failure, homelessness rampant, crime surging, and now uncontrolled violence. He refuses to cooperate with ICE, letting smugglers operate freely. President Trump didn't create this crisis. He's cleaning it up. A memory flashed through Leavitt's mind. Days campaigning alongside Trump, facing biased media and angry crowds. She recalled his advice. Karoline, hit hard, never yield. Now in this hearing room, she was doing just that. She turned to Newsom, her voice soft but cutting. Governor, you speak of human dignity, but do you think of the victims of the criminals ICE is targeting, or are you only concerned with your political image? Murmurs spread through the room. The hearing chamber felt suffocated by the heat of the debate. Sharp gazes from lawmakers, the scratch of reporters' pens, and the audience's bated breath, creating an atmosphere taut as a bowstring. Gavin Newsom, governor of California, sat upright, hands clasped before him, his face composed but his eyes blazing with resolve. After Leavitt's fierce assault, he knew it was time to reclaim the narrative, to pivot from numbers to human stories. Leavitt, seated opposite, adjusted her documents, her confidence unshaken, her cold blue eyes watching him like a fighter awaiting her opponent's move. Chairwoman Margaret Hensley, with a dry but authoritative tone, signaled, "Governor Newsom, you have the opportunity to respond. Please proceed." Newsom stood, smoothing his jacket, and approached the podium with the poised demeanor of a leader accustomed to weathering storms. The chandelier's light illuminated his face, highlighting deep-etched lines, marks of years in political battles. He cleared his throat, beginning in a low, measured tone, a stark contrast to Leavitt's sharpness. Chairwoman Hensley, distinguished members, I'm not here to argue over statistics or charts. I'm here for the people, those living in fear due to this administration's ruthless policies. Los Angeles isn't the criminal battlefield Miss Leavitt portrays. It's where millions of immigrants build lives, pay taxes, raise children. They're not national security threats. They're neighbors, colleagues, the very heart of California. He paused, his gaze sweeping the Democratic lawmakers, receiving nods of empathy. Newsom held up a photo, a middle-aged woman with a gentle smile, flanked by two young children. This is Elena Martinez, a single mother in Los Angeles, working 12-hour days at a bakery. She was detained by ICE during a raid just for passing through a target area. Her kids slept at a neighbor's, not knowing where their mother was. Is this the security Miss Leavitt speaks of? His voice rose, charged with emotion. Hundreds of stories like this are unfolding across our state. These raids don't just target criminals, they sweep up innocent people, destroying communities. He shifted his tone, hardening. Legally, the president's deployment of the National Guard is a blatant abuse of power. The 10th Amendment protects state rights, but he bypassed us without a word of consultation. Los Angeles didn't request the National Guard. Our sheriff didn't ask for federal aid. This is an invasion designed to amplify conflict and distract the public. Newsom turned to Leavitt, his eyes challenging. Miss Leavitt, you speak of order, but what order is there when children live in fear, when families are torn apart? Representative Paul Whitaker, a Republican from Arizona, stood abruptly, his voice sharp. Governor Newsom, you say no help was needed, but Los Angeles police were overwhelmed. Their reports show escalating violence, stores vandalized, officers attacked. How do you explain that? Newsom replied, unflinching. Mr. Whitaker, the violence is real, but it erupted due to ICE's provocation. If the federal government had coordinated with us instead of imposing, we could have managed the situation. This administration wants chaotic scenes to justify their policies. Representative Rosa Delgado from the Democratic side interjected, her voice thick with emotion. Governor, can you elaborate on the impact on immigrant communities? Newsom nodded, his tone softening. Thank you, Miss Delgado. I met a family in East Los Angeles. Parents working in construction, their kids in college, they live in daily fear, wondering if ICE will knock. These aren't criminals, they're California's future, but this administration wants to erase them just to score political points. Newsom turned to Homan, seated beside Leavitt, his gaze icy. "And Mr. Homan, I hear you threaten to arrest me and Mayor Bass if we obstruct ICE. If you think I'm breaking the law, go ahead. I'm right here. But don't touch innocent people who just want to live." His words echoed, stirring murmurs in the hearing room. A few reporters raised their phones, capturing the moment. Leavitt, seated across, jotted a note, her face expressionless. Homan beside her pursed his lips, his eyes glinting with restraint. Representative Whitaker stood again, his voice steely. "Governor, you're dodging the issue. Los Angeles is drowning in violence. Cars burning, stores looted. You blame ICE, but your sanctuary state policies hamstring local police. Where's your evidence that ICE targets innocent people?" Newsom responded, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Whitaker, I have dozens of reports from human rights organizations documenting mistaken detentions. ICE isn't transparent. They don't share data with us. If they're truly targeting criminals, why not coordinate with California? The truth is this administration wants a message. Immigration is a sin, but we won't stay silent." In Newsom's mind, a flicker of anxiety passed. He thought of his presidential ambitions, the pressure from Democratic donors urging him to stand stronger against Trump, but he also knew the polls were against him. The American public, as Leavitt pointed out, was leaning toward Trump. He took a deep breath, determined not to show weakness. Chairwoman Hensley struck her gavel, her voice stern. "We will proceed with the next witness after a brief question. Period." Newsom returned to his seat, his eyes flicking toward Leavitt as if reassessing his opponent. The hearing room's lights seemed to dim slightly, as if the space itself held its breath for what came next. The murmurs from the audience faded as Chairwoman Margaret Hensley struck her gavel, her eyes sweeping the witnesses with severity. "We will hear from Mr. Tom Homan, the President's immigration advisor, and Miss Karen Bass, Mayor of Los Angeles. Mr. Homan, please begin." Karoline Leavitt sat still, hands resting lightly on the table, her eyes following Homan with confidence. Across, Gavin Newsom bowed his head, reviewing notes, trying to mask the tension after his recent counterattack. Tom Homan, with a rugged demeanor and a voice like gravel, stepped to the podium. His grey suit couldn't hide the roughness of a man who'd spent decades in immigration enforcement. He looked directly at the lawmakers, his gaze unwavering. "I've worked at ICE for over 30 years. I know the difference between criminals and innocents. What's happening in Los Angeles isn't the indiscriminate raids Governor Newsom claims. We target threats to public safety, drug traffickers, money launderers, cartel affiliates. In the past week, ICE arrested 43 individuals in Los Angeles, all with criminal records or ties to transnational crime. These are facts, not politics." Homan held up a stack of documents, his voice sharpening. One example, Ricardo Vargas, 41, arrested for running a money laundering network for a Colombian cartel. He lived freely in California thanks to sanctuary state policies. If we hadn't acted, he'd still be threatening Los Angeles residents. He turned to Newsom, his eyes like spears. "Governor, you talk about human dignity, but do you think of the victims of these cartels? The families destroyed by drugs? ICE doesn't create violence. We stop it." The hearing room fell silent, save for the rustle of reporters' papers. Representative Rosa Delgado stood, her voice sharp. "Mr. Homan, you say ICE targets criminals, but why the mistaken detentions? Los Angeles residents are living in fear." Homan replied, unflinching. "Miss Delgado, no system is perfect, but 98% of our arrests are on target. Mistakes are corrected quickly. Meanwhile, California's policies obstruct our ability to verify identities, making our job harder." Hensley struck her gavel, signaling the next witness. Karen Bass, mayor of Los Angeles, stepped to the podium, her shoulders slightly hunched but her eyes resolute. Her navy business suit underscored her calm demeanor, though her voice trembled slightly as she began. Los Angeles is a city of diversity and harmony, but these past weeks we've been pushed to the brink of chaos by ICE's raids. I don't deny the violence, but it stems from federal provocation. My people, hard-working immigrants, are living in fear. We have a rapid response network to protect them, and I'm proud of that. Bass paused, glancing at Newsom as if seeking support. We don't need the National Guard. The Los Angeles police could handle the situation, if not pressured by ICE. These raids don't solve crime, they create division. Her voice grew firm. I met a father, 20 years in America, detained just for passing through a raid zone. This is the reality this administration won't acknowledge. Representative Paul Whitaker interjected sharply. Myth Bass, you say the Los Angeles police are capable, but the sheriff's report says they're overwhelmed. Cars burning, stores looted. You call that control? Bass replied, calm but tense. Mr. Whitaker, the violence is real, but it wouldn't have happened without ICE's provocation. We're building trust with our communities, but the federal government is destroying it. A moment later, Leavitt, with a triumphant gleam in her eye, interjected, holding up a letter. Honorable members, this is a letter from the LAPD sheriff, sent the day before this hearing. He confirms local forces couldn't handle the violent crowds. An officer was seriously injured by a thrown rock. A patrol car was burned. Miss Bass, you say Los Angeles doesn't need help, but your own people are begging for it. She switched the screen, showing an officer kneeling on the street, blood streaming from his forehead. Bass lowered her head, not responding immediately, her eyes betraying unease. Newsom nearby whispered to an aide, his face tense. Representative Delgado tried to salvage the moment, her voice urgent. Miss Bass, can you clarify what is Los Angeles doing to protect its immigrant communities? Bass nodded, regaining composure. We're increasing patrols, providing legal aid, and working with community organizations, but ICE's pressure makes everything worse. Hensley struck her gavel, ending the witness segment. We will proceed with final arguments. Leavitt returned to her seat, exchanging a glance with Homan, who nodded approvingly. Boss sat down, her eyes meeting Newsom's as if signaling they were losing ground. Newsom clenched his fists, preparing for a final counterattack. Leavitt, meanwhile, flipped through her documents, ready to deliver a decisive blow. Chairwoman Margaret Hensley, with an icy tone, signaled, Miss Leavitt, please present the administration's final argument. Leavitt stepped to the podium, each footfall like a war drum. She set her documents down, but didn't open them, as if every figure, every piece of evidence was etched in her mind. Her voice rang out, not loud, but powerful, like a manifesto. Honorable members, we've heard enough excuses. Governor Newsom wants to paint a picture of a California oppressed by the federal government, but the truth is, he's failed to protect his own people. I'll show you undeniable evidence. She clicked the remote, and the screen lit up with a new video, raw and unflinching. Images appeared. A Los Angeles street shrouded in smoke, an officer surrounded by a mob, blood dripping from his temple, a Jordan Studio 23 store with shattered glass, sneakers scattered on the sidewalk, and a patrol car ablaze. Flames reflected. In the eyes of angry protesters, the video's shouts echoed, making some Democratic lawmakers shift uncomfortably. This is Los Angeles today, Leavitt said, her voice low but sharp. Not because of ICE, but because Governor Newsom refuses to cooperate with the federal government. He lets violence spread, then blames the president. She held up a thin file, her voice hardening. This is an internal ICE report. 50 individuals deported from Los Angeles last month, all tied to drug trafficking or money laundering. One case, Miguel Torres, 35, arrested with 10 kilos of cocaine in his warehouse. Is this the innocent Governor Newsom defends? She paused, her gaze piercing Newsom like a dagger to his weak point. And here's the LAPD sheriff's letter confirming their forces couldn't handle the violent crowds. They needed the National Guard. President Trump answered because he puts national security above politics. Representative Paul Whitaker from the Republican side stood, his voice brimming with excitement. Miss Leavitt, can you confirm, without the National Guard, what would happen in Los Angeles? Leavitt replied, her voice steady. Mr. Whitaker, federal facilities like ICE's detention center would be attacked. More officers would be injured, more businesses destroyed. The president acted to prevent disaster, not cause it. Representative Rosa Delgado from the Democratic side interjected, her voice urgent. Miss Leavitt, you focus on violence, but what about the families torn apart? Governor Newsom mentioned Elena Martinez. She's not a criminal. Leavitt didn't waver. Miss Delgado, Miss Martinez was released after 24 hours once her identity was verified. But ask Governor Newsom, why didn't he stop the mobs burning the stores of the very families he claims to protect? His sanctuary state policies hinder police, plunging Los Angeles into chaos. Newsom, unable to stay silent, stood, his voice trembling with anger. Miss Leavitt, you're twisting the truth. Los Angeles doesn't need the National Guard. We're building trust with our communities, but ICE is destroying it. He pointed at Leavitt, his eyes blazing. This administration wants to divide us, and you're its messenger. Leavitt, despite Newsom's outburst, maintained a chilling calm. She responded, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. Governor, you talk about trust, but you've lost it. The people of Los Angeles, those who lost stores, the injured officers, don't trust you anymore. Polls show 54% of Americans stand behind President Trump. You can ignore them, but we won't. She turned to the lawmakers, her voice like a verdict. President Trump acted for national security. California must cooperate, not obstruct. The hearing room erupted in applause from the Republican side. Whitaker and other lawmakers stood, cheering Leavitt. Newsom, face flushed, sat down, whispering to an aide, his eyes betraying defeat. Tom Homan, beside Leavitt, gave a slight nod, his gaze glinting with approval. Delgado tried to interject, but Hensley struck her gavel, her voice stern. We will conclude the arguments. Miss Leavitt, thank you. Leavitt returned to her seat, heart pounding but face impassive. She knew she'd landed a decisive blow. In her mind, she recalled a moment with Trump, when he clasped her hand after a campaign rally and said, Karoline, you're our future now. She was proving it. Newsom, across from her, bowed his head, his eyes scanning the Democratic lawmakers, seeking support but finding only worried glances. He knew he'd been cornered. The hearing room doors closed, but the storm of debate didn't stop. Outside, in the marble hallways of Capitol Hill, reporters' camera flashes flickered like fireworks, illuminating Karoline Leavitt's face as she stepped out, maintaining her icy calm. A throng of journalists surrounded her, microphones raised, voices overlapping with demands for answers. Gavin Newsom, a few steps away, was cornered by another group of reporters, his eyes briefly unsettled, though he maintained a professional smile. The hearing had ended with the advantage tilted toward Leavitt, but the battle now shifted to another arena, social media and public opinion. Leavitt paused before a CNN reporter who asked with a skeptical tone, Miss Leavitt, you say ICE only, targets criminals, but reports show innocent people detained. How do you respond? Leavitt looked straight into the camera, her voice calm but sharp. ICE acts on precise intelligence, with 98% of arrests on target. Mistakes, if any, are corrected quickly. But ask Governor Newsom, what has he done to stop the violence in Los Angeles, besides blaming the federal government? Her response silenced the reporter, and she swiftly moved on, avoiding the flurry of follow-up questions. Meanwhile, Newsom faced an MSNBC reporter trying to find a bright spot for him. "Governor, you emphasized the humanitarian impact of ICE's raids. Do you think the hearing shifted public opinion?" Newsom took a deep breath, trying to regain his footing. "I believe the American people will see the truth. This administration is dividing communities for political gain. California will keep fighting for human dignity." But his voice lacked conviction, as if he sensed public sentiment leaning toward his opponent. Leavitt, back in her waiting room, opened her phone and posted with the speed of a seasoned media strategist, "Truth won at Capitol Hill. Governor Newsom can't deny 54% of Americans support deporting criminals. Los Angeles needs order, not chaos." She attached a short clip from the hearing where she presented the LAPD sheriff's letter. Within minutes, the post went viral, garnering thousands of likes and shares from the MAGA community. A prominent account commented, "Leavitt just schooled Newsom. Trump picked the right one." At the same time, President Trump, ever quick to seize the moment, posted on X, shaking up social media. "Karoline Leavitt is America's star. She shut Gavin Newsom down at Capitol Hill. California needs real leadership, not a loser." The post quickly racked up millions of views, pushing Leavitt's name to the top of trending lists. Hashtags flooded the platform, with memes mocking Newsom and praising Leavitt's tough style. Newsom, in a nearby temporary meeting room, sat with Mayor Karen Bass and his team of advisors. His face was tense as an aide handed him a phone showing posts dominating public sentiment. "We need to respond now," Bass said, her voice anxious. "Leavitt is shaping the narrative." Newsom nodded, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. He posted, trying to regain momentum, "California won't bow to division. We protect people, not politics." But the post garnered only a few hundred likes, drowned out by a wave of criticism. One user commented, "Newsom, you let Los Angeles burn and talk about justice. Face reality." Meanwhile, an independent journalist posted a brief analysis with an Ipsos poll chart bolstering Leavitt's argument. 54% of Americans support deporting illegal immigrant criminals. Newsom can't deny these numbers. Leavitt wins with facts. The post drew thousands of shares, adding pressure on Newsom. Pro-immigration groups tried to counter, sharing stories of families affected by ICE, but they couldn't compete with the MAGA community's firepower. In Los Angeles, public sentiment was equally heated. A group of protesters gathered outside City Hall, holding signs reading, "Protect immigrant communities." But on streets ravaged by violence, many locals expressed frustration with Newsom. An Adidas store owner, standing before shattered glass, told a local reporter, "I support immigration, but I need safety. Newsom hasn't done anything." Such stories spread quickly, further weakening his stance. Leavitt, receiving a text from Trump's team, gave a slight smile. An advisor wrote, "You shook things up. Keep going." She knew her role as press secretary wasn't just speaking. It was shaping public opinion. She posted again, "Thank you, President Trump and the American people, for standing with the truth. We won't let California obstruct national security." The post continued to roil social media, cementing her image as a rising star in Trump's administration. Newsom, in the meeting room, stared at his phone, his eyes darkening. Bess beside him whispered, "We need a press conference now, Gavin. We can't let them control the narrative." Newsom nodded, but inwardly he knew the media battle was tilting toward Leavitt. He thought of his political ambitions, his grand plans, and felt them wavering. Leavitt, with her sharpness and social media prowess, had turned the hearing into a resounding media victory. The sunset bathed Capitol Hill's domes in gold, but inside, the hearing's echoes resounded like war drums. Karoline Leavitt stepped out of the building, her coat draped over her shoulder, her eyes gleaming with triumph. The crowd of reporters had thinned, with only a few cameras quietly capturing her departure. On social media, her name remained the focal point, with posts praising her sharpness and uncompromising MAGA style. "Leavitt is Trump's fire. Norme didn't stand a chance." A prominent account shared her image at the podium with the caption, "This is America's future." Meanwhile, Newsom faced a barrage of criticism. One user wrote, "Norme let Los Angeles burn and blamed Trump. Shameful." His lawsuit against Trump, though still being prepared by his legal team, now faced high risks of failure, especially as public opinion leaned toward the federal government. Newsom, in his Sacramento office, sat across from Mayor Karen Bass and advisors. The atmosphere was heavy. Bass, her voice low, said, "Gavin, we need a new strategy. Leavitt has taken over social media and the public is turning against us." Newsom nodded, but his eyes showed fatigue. His once bright presidential ambitions were now clouded by this defeat. Democratic donors began raising questions, and some party lawmakers whispered that he'd pushed California into a too risky confrontation with Trump. Still, Newsom wasn't giving up. He knew he had to reshape his image, perhaps through a bolder media campaign. But the road ahead was fraught with challenges. In Los Angeles, the streets once engulfed in violence began to calm, but the scars remained. Business owners, like the one whose Adidas store was vandalized, voiced frustration with Newsom on local forums. Meanwhile, the immigrant community, though fearful, held small meetings, seeking ways to protect their rights. Leavitt, on her flight back to the White House, gazed out the window, her eyes reflecting the glowing city lights below. The battle for public opinion is never truly over. What do you think will happen next for Governor Newsom and Karoline Leavitt? Will California find a way to navigate this complex federal-state conflict? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this detailed analysis compelling, please like this video, share it with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more in-depth stories and analyses. Your support helps us bring you the full picture of the political landscape.